I clenched my phone so tightly my fingers started going numb. The loudspeakers at Indianapolis Airport echoed endlessly. Flight 364 to Chicago now boarding at Gate 12. Around me, people hurried by with their rolling suitcases, streams of chaotic movement flooding toward their gates. But I stood frozen in the middle of the terminal, like I'd been sucked straight into a whirlwind of confusion. On the other end of the line, Mrs. Helen, the elderly neighbor who had lived next door to us for the past 20 years, spoke with a tremble in her voice. "Sophie, sweetie, do you know this morning, a moving truck pulled up outside your house? Your parents told me they sold it to someone else. The house doesn't belong to your family anymore." A wave of dizziness hit me like a punch straight to the chest. I swallowed hard. "They sold it." "Without even telling me, I thought you knew. Just yesterday, your mom came over to borrow my old tin cookie box, said she needed it to pack up some keepsakes before they moved out." She paused for a moment, then let out a long sigh. "It's strange, Sophie. That house holds so many memories. Why would they hide something this big from you?" I had no answer. My head was spinning. That house wasn't just some old wooden structure, it was my entire childhood, the only real sense of home I thought I had left. And now they'd sold it, without even bothering to send me a single message for 25 years. I'd been their only child. Sure, after I moved to Chicago for my marketing job. Life got busier, but we still talked on the phone at least once a week. I never saw any sign that I was being pushed away, let alone cast aside enough for them to sell our family home behind my back. Or maybe there had always been secrets, something they'd kept buried beneath that polished exterior all these years. I remembered every detail of that house. The two-story colonial with its faded white paint, sitting on the corner of Hamilton Street in a small Indiana town where winters blanketed the rose garden in front with pure snow and summers echoed with BBQs filled with laughter. My mother had patiently taught me to tend those roses like she was trying to plant beautiful memories deep inside me. But beneath that peaceful surface, there were always silent shadows lurking that I could never quite explain. The basement, that heavy wooden door leading down, was always locked. Every time I even got close, my mother would suddenly appear, her grip tightening on my shoulder. "Don't go down there, Sophie. It's dangerous. Your father kept all kinds of toxic chemicals down there from when he was fixing the old systems. Listen to me. You are not allowed down there." But at night, strange noises crept up through the old wooden floorboards. Faint, muffled sobbing as if someone was quietly crying, mixed with the soft clanking of metal against metal. I was only 10. I would stand for hours by that dusty door, ear pressed against the keyhole, listening. But whenever I tried to bring it up to my parents, I only got tense stares and their dismissive scolding, "Stop making things up. Old wooden houses creak like that. Don't let your imagination scare you." As the years passed, I tried to bury those eerie memories. College kept me busy, then graduating top of my class, building my career in Chicago, building my own life. I thought the past had gone quiet. Until that phone call this morning, that night, I couldn't sleep in my 18th floor apartment in Chicago. Miss Helen's words kept dripping through my mind like venom. Why did they sell the house so suddenly? Were they really struggling financially? Did they owe money? Or were they covering something up in that basement? I tore through old emails, bank accounts, financial records. Everything still looked normal. No sign of financial stress. And that was the scariest part. Whatever they were hiding, it didn't seem to be about money. By sunrise, as the city lights blurred through the glass windows, I quietly packed my suitcase and booked the earliest ticket back to my hometown. When I stepped out of the taxi on Hamilton Street, a strange mixture of familiarity and cold emptiness wrapped around me. But the house I grew up in was already different. A huge "sold" sign hung out front. A pickup truck filled the driveway. A young family was happily moving in. Kids ran around laughing, oblivious to any darkness that might have once lived there. My parents had temporarily rented a small apartment near the central bus station. They had no idea I was coming. When my mother opened the door, her eyes went wide, and my father immediately grew awkward. "Sophie, what are you doing here? I wanted to hear it directly from you." The room fell into a stiff silence. After a few uneasy seconds, my father spoke first. The house was falling apart. We didn't need it anymore. The upkeep was getting expensive, and someone made a good offer, so we sold it. Where's the money? What are you doing with it? My mother quickly cut in, avoiding my gaze. Just reinvesting, sweetie, a more stable real estate project. We need to think about our future, too. I stared into their eyes. Deep inside, my instincts screamed this was a flimsy cover. My father's lips were pressed tightly, and my mother's fingers drummed rapidly on the armrest, a nervous habit she couldn't control. I said nothing more, because now I knew pushing them directly wouldn't get me anywhere. I had to approach this differently. I had to get back into that house, especially into that basement, and deep in my gut, a cold dread started to rise. Whatever I would find down there might shatter everything I ever believed about my own family. For 2 days after that confrontation, I lived in a fog. I didn't speak to my parents. They didn't reach out either, as if waiting for me to cool off and let it all blow over. But this time, I wasn't going to let it go so easily. That evening, I drove aimlessly around town down quiet streets lit by dim yellow street lamps, past little shops that closed early, through spring's lingering chill whistling through the trees. My hometown looked exactly the same. I was the one who had changed. As my car crawled past the old house, I stopped. The lights inside were still on, music drifting from the upstairs window. The new family seemed to be settling in quickly. I stared through the windshield for a long time, my eyes locking onto that familiar basement door, the one I had spent over 2 decades only watching from a distance. I knew I had to approach the new owners, but how I couldn't just barge in with some vague excuse about wanting to check the basement. No. I needed a believable reason for them to let me inside. The next morning, I went to the town's real estate office, the one that handled the house sale. The young receptionist, Katie, looked at me with polite curiosity when I introduced myself as the daughter of the previous owners. "Oh, you're the Pattersons' daughter. I remember them well. Your parents moved out so suddenly. All the paperwork went through super fast. I think the whole thing closed in less than 2 weeks." I frowned. 2 weeks, my family had never done anything that rash. "Who bought it?" I asked. Katie pulled up the transaction details on her screen. The Parker family. They just relocated from Ohio. The husband's a construction engineer. The wife's an elementary school teacher. Really sweet people. "Is there any way I could get their contact info? I just want to visit my childhood home one last time. Say goodbye properly." Katie smiled sympathetically. "I'm sure they wouldn't mind. Here you go. This is Mrs. Anna Parker's number." That afternoon, I gathered my nerves and called Anna. Her voice was surprised but warm. "Oh, Sophie, I'd be happy to meet you. Honestly, I was wondering why no relatives ever came to pick up any keepsakes. Your family left a few old boxes down in the basement. You're welcome to stop by. I'll be home all week." The basement. My heart pounded. "Thank you so much. I'll come by tomorrow afternoon." Stepping back into the house the next day felt like a tidal wave of memories crashing into me. Every corner, every creak in the wooden floors, even the faint scent of old pine paint, everything was exactly as I remembered. But inside me was a tangled mix of nostalgia and dread. Anna warmly led me around until we reached the basement door. "Here we are. There are a few boxes with your family's name down here. We haven't gotten around to clearing them out yet." I nodded, thanked her, and gently pushed open the wooden door. The old hinges screeched like a warning siren. The narrow wooden staircase led into cold, damp darkness. Thick dust blanketed each step. A flickering fluorescent bulb overhead struggled to stay lit. As my foot touched the freezing concrete floor, a shiver climbed my spine. On the right were the cardboard boxes Anna had mentioned. But what immediately caught my eye was something I had never known existed: a safe embedded in the cement wall at the far end of the basement. The safe hadn't been removed. The new owners probably hadn't even noticed it yet. A wave of adrenaline surged through me. My pulse raced. Was this it? Next to the safe, resting on the floor, was an old, nearly rotted leather bag. I knelt and flipped it open. Inside was a worn-out external hard drive and several stacks of damp papers. Breathing heavily, I stuffed everything into my purse. Trying to stay calm, I didn't have much time. If Anna came down right now, I wouldn't have a single plausible explanation. At that moment, I couldn't fully grasp what I had just touched, but a sharp, chilling instinct whispered inside my mind. This could completely destroy everything I ever believed about my family. That night, in my rented room, my hands trembled as I plugged the drive into my laptop. Folder after folder appeared on screen, encrypted files. Strange names, personal records, contracts, financial transactions. But one folder made my heart stop: adoption files, confidential. I clicked it open. Page after page of documents appeared, long lists of newborn babies, birth dates, hospitals, adoption placements, transaction amounts. Many of the contracts looked legitimate, but I recognized immediately they were forged. My father's name appeared on countless files. I was hypnotized, staring at the screen. Questions kept hammering through my mind. What had my parents been doing for the past 20 years? Were they involved in black market baby trafficking? Why did they have to hide this, and what even darker secrets were still buried beneath all this data? I knew now that I had stumbled into something far beyond a family secret. This could be the tip of a dangerous criminal network. And I, their only daughter, had just become its biggest threat. I didn't sleep a single minute that night. The files spun endlessly in my head, like some looping nightmare I couldn't wake from. I ran deep searches on the hard drive, trying to trace every fragment of data, not just my father's name, but dozens of others I'd never seen before. Some of the files read St. Monica Hospital, Indiana, transaction complete $35,000, adoptive family. Louis and Meredith Hoffman, Philadelphia, broker M.B., confirmed, broker. There was an entire network of middlemen orchestrating these adoptions. Suddenly, I remembered the strangers who used to visit our house when I was little. They'd sit in the living room for hours, speaking in strange, formal words I didn't understand. Every time, my mother would make me go upstairs to bed early. I thought they were just Dad's business associates. But now I saw it differently. Those were likely human trafficking deals happening right under our roof. Morning light filtered through the curtains, but there was no warmth in it. I knew I needed help, someone experienced enough to handle this mountain of data. I couldn't go any further alone. One name flashed through my mind: Rachel Kim, an old friend from journalism school. Now she was an investigative reporter at a major Chicago newspaper. If anyone had the skills, the guts, and the resources to help me, it was her. I hit call. Sophie. Oh my God, it's been forever. Why do you sound like you're shaking? Rachel's voice was cheerful but instantly concerned. Rachel, I need your help. This is bigger than any story you've ever written. A few minutes later, I poured everything out: the phone call from Mrs. Helen, the shock of the sudden house sale, the forbidden basement, and what I'd uncovered on the hard drive. Rachel stayed silent for a long time. Finally, she exhaled. Jesus Christ, Sophie, you've stumbled into something huge and dangerous. I know. You could be in real danger. Your parents might just be one piece of this. I'm coming to your town this afternoon. Don't touch anything else until I get there. By that evening, Rachel arrived at the small motel where I was staying. Same petite frame, same sharp eyes behind thick glasses, but this time, her face was tense. I brought my own encrypted drive. We need to back up everything right now, just in case. Rachel opened her laptop, swiftly connecting cables with the efficiency of a seasoned investigator. As she scanned through the data, more chilling details surfaced: dozens of offshore bank accounts in small Caribbean nations. The total transactions through this network could easily surpass tens of millions of dollars. This operation is massive, Rachel muttered. And what's even more disturbing, this isn't just your family. There are at least 20 other families involved across multiple states. These forged adoption contracts were laundered into legitimacy with the help of several small private hospitals. The more Rachel uncovered, the colder my hands became. Memories stacked on top of each other like falling dominoes. My quiet, simple hometown might have been a secret hub for a cross-state criminal enterprise operating for years without anyone noticing. But what shattered me completely was when Rachel stopped at one old video file, timestamped nearly 20 years ago. On the screen, my mother appeared much younger, cradling a newborn baby in her arms. Standing beside her was a man in a white lab coat, either a doctor or a broker. My mother's voice came through. Soft but unmistakable final confirmation. No traces left behind. Has the payment been completed? The man replied, yes. $35,000. The paperwork will be fully legitimized within 3 weeks. I heard my own strangled breath escape me. My lips froze. Not a single word came out. Rachel sat in silence for a long time, then reached over and gripped my hand tightly. Sophie, I'm so sorry. As the screen went black, I knew there would be no going back to the way things were with my parents. Ever. I stood up, feeling like the blood had been drained from my entire body. There had to be a reason they sold the house so quickly. They knew someone was closing in. Maybe the organization behind all this had started questioning their loyalty. I'm not safe anymore, am I? I whispered. Rachel nodded, her eyes turning ice cold. This isn't just a family issue anymore. Sophie. This is federal crime, like you need to call the FBI immediately. I bit my lip, but deep down, I knew there was still something I had to do first. I needed to confront my parents face to face one last time. And this time, they wouldn't be able to hide. That evening, I parked outside my parents' rental apartment. My chest weighed down like a boulder pressing into my lungs. I didn't know which faces would greet me when that door opened, the loving parents I once adored, or accomplices in a vile crime spanning 2 decades. My mother answered the door. She froze for a moment when she saw me, a flicker of panic flashing in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with her usual thin smile. Sophie. It's late, honey. We need to talk. Seriously. I said, my voice colder than I even expected. My father peeked out from the living room, tension flashing across his face. I stepped inside and slammed the door behind me. The air in the tiny apartment thickened instantly, like the heavy humidity before a storm. I went back to the old house. I began, locking my gaze onto theirs. The new owners let me into the basement. My mother's face twitched slightly. My father swallowed hard, his throat visibly shifting. There were some things you forgot in the safe. I paused deliberately, a hard drive, documents, fake adoption contracts, offshore accounts, and the old videos. The silence was suffocating. Only the ticking of the wall clock broke through the heavy air. Finally, my mother spoke softly. Sophie, you don't understand. Then explain it to me. My voice cracked, shaking with fury. My father rubbed his temples, trying to compose himself. It started when my business went bankrupt. We were drowning in debt. An old associate introduced us to a different opportunity. They said it was just helping desperate couples adopt without going through the government's long, complicated process. My mother jumped in, her voice trembling. They told us it was all safe, legal, just shortcutting red tape. Sophie. But then it spiraled out of control. Once we were in, there was no way out. Shortcuts, I sneered. Dozens of newborn babies sold like merchandise. Mothers manipulated. Forged contracts. That's what you call a shortcut. My mother's face turned ghostly pale. My father hung his head in silence, fists clenched tight. For years, I grew up right in the middle of this nightmare without knowing it. Every night, I heard strange noises from the basement. Strangers came and went. And you called them, friends, Mom, you're in one of the videos handing over a newborn. My mother clutched her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. We didn't have a choice, Sophie. If we refused, they would have hurt our entire family. Hurt you, I stared at them. So instead, you chose to become part of it. Protect yourselves. Take the money. 20 years. You lived comfortably while those mothers lost everything. My father suddenly stood up, his voice cracking. You think it was that easy? They control everything, banks, lawyers, judges, doctors. If we had exposed them, our whole family would have been dead long ago. Sophie, I staggered back, bracing myself against the sofa to keep my balance. They weren't victims. They were collaborators. They chose self-preservation over innocent lives. Why sell the house now? I pressed, my voice sharp. Who gave the order? Is the organization clearing evidence? My mother sobbed harder. They're suspicious of us. Federal agents have been quietly investigating for months. The networks started wiping anything that could trace back to them. My father exhaled in defeat. They forced us to sell, to destroy every old record. But we kept the hard drive as leverage, just in case. Everything collapsed. I stared at them in horror, the pain drilling deep into my bones. They kept the hard drive not to expose the truth, but as a bargaining chip, their insurance policy. The pieces suddenly clicked together. Every time they forbade me from going near the basement, the strangers who visited, their nervous glances whenever investigative reporters came around. I gasped. You never intended to stop. You just feared getting exposed. Neither answered. My mother wept silently. My father collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. They had kept their silence for too long, and now they had nothing left to say. That night, Rachel called me, Sophie. I handed a copy of the hard drive to the regional federal office. The FBI just opened a special task force, but I need to warn you, this is no longer small. They will fight back. What do you mean your parents aren't the only ones involved in this town? And when this network feels threatened, they will do anything to silence anyone holding their secrets. I swallowed hard. Rachel continued, starting now. Sophie, you need to brace for the worst smears, threats, losing your job, losing friends, even being hunted. I gripped the phone tighter, staring at the street lamp outside my hotel window. I had opened Pandora's box. There was no turning back. 3 days after confronting my parents, the real storm hit. It all happened so fast I could barely react. That morning, as I stepped out of the hotel, a local TV reporter ambushed me right outside the gate. She shoved a microphone close to my face. Her tone razor-sharp. Sophie Patterson. There are rumors you're accusing your own family of involvement in illegal child adoption crimes. Do you have a response to claims that you're mentally unstable and fabricating these stories? I froze. What she didn't give me a second to recover. Continuing rapidly. We've received reports that you were treated for depression during college and that you're currently exhibiting signs of paranoia. Your unauthorized removal of private property from your family's former home may also lead to legal action filed by your own parents. I was speechless. The camera crew behind her captured my every reaction, the shock, the confusion, and finally the silence. Exactly what they needed to portray me as a mentally unstable lunatic. Rachel rushed over the moment I called for help. As soon as we met, she tossed me her phone. Look at this. The media's exploding. The screen was flooded with headlines. Patterson family's only daughter shows signs of mental instability. Shocking family rift, truth or delusion victim or master manipulator. I scrolled through the articles, trembling. Old medical records from my college years had been leaked, a few counseling sessions after a breakup, some anxiety medication during exam season, and they twisted all of it into a history of mental instability. I felt like I was being publicly executed in broad daylight. Rachel gripped my hand tightly. They're flipping the narrative. They're trying to frame you as a paranoid fantasist to discredit all the evidence. How did they even get my private medical records? I whispered. Rachel clenched her jaw. They don't just have top lawyers. They've got insiders in hospitals, law enforcement, the media. This is how white-collar mafia works. They don't need to kill you, they just destroy your credibility. That evening, my phone rang nonstop. My boss at the marketing firm in Chicago finally called, his voice stiff and corporate. We've received numerous complaints and damaging rumors. Sophie. To protect the company's reputation, we have no choice but to place you on indefinite suspension pending internal investigation. I collapsed into a chair, piece by piece. They were tearing my life apart. Rachel didn't leave my side that night. She opened her laptop, typing furiously as she mapped out a counterattack. Listen. They want to drag you through the mud, fine. Then we find living witnesses, victims, mothers who lost their children, real testimonies that can shatter this crazy daughter smearing her family's story. Rachel combed back through the data extracted from the hard drive. She found 2 files listing birth mothers whose babies never appeared in any legitimate federal adoption registry. One of them lived in Ohio. Her name's Kara Benson, gave birth at St. Monica in 2008, but there's no matching federal adoption record. This could be a black market case. I looked at Rachel, a faint glimmer of hope piercing the darkness. Let's go find her. The next day, we hit the road for Ohio. Rachel buried herself in her laptop, cross-referencing data while I sat quietly, struggling to keep my breathing steady. What lay ahead might be the only thing that could save both my reputation and my life. Kara Benson lived in a rundown working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Cleveland. Her small, crooked house sat behind an overgrown lawn. A woman in her mid-30s answered the door, her face gaunt, her eyes wary. "Who are you?" Her voice was rough and guarded. Rachel spoke first. "I'm an investigative journalist. This is Sophie Patterson. We believe you were a victim of the illegal adoption ring operating out of St. Monica Hospital." Kara froze. She stepped back slightly, lips pressed tight, her eyes welling with tears. After a moment, her body shook as she burst into quiet sobs. "Oh my God, someone's finally saying it." I stepped forward and gently took her hand. "We believe you, Kara, but we need your story. Will you stand with us?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with terror but also a desperate hunger for freedom. "For 15 years, I've lived in silent hell. But if telling my story can save other children, I'll do it." For the first time in weeks, a small ray of light broke through my storm-dark sky, but I also knew the true counterattack from the people behind this had yet to begin. And the biggest battle exposing them was still waiting ahead. 1 week after meeting Kara, the real earthquake finally struck. Rachel and her investigative team conducted the first private interview with Kara. Her story was even more brutal than I had ever imagined. In 2008, Kara was only 18, pregnant after a manipulative relationship. Not wanting to disappoint her parents, she sought help from an organization calling itself the St. Monica Private Adoption Assistance Center. They promised to help her find a loving family for the baby, covered her medical expenses, even provided financial support throughout her pregnancy. Kara trusted them, signing piles of paperwork she barely read, but just hours after giving birth, her baby vanished from the hospital. Legal adoption records. None, lawyers gone. The original counselor disappeared for Char. For 15 years, Kara had lived tormented, haunted by the unknown. Where was her child? Was it alive, dead, who was raising it? The organization vanished as if it never existed. And now? The data on my hard drive proved Kara was one of many victims in the very network my parents had once served. Rachel and I submitted Kara's full statement along with all supporting documents to the FBI's Cleveland office. Now, this was no longer just wild accusations from a mentally unstable daughter, but just as Rachel had warned, the people behind this weren't going down quietly. The very next morning, I received an email from my parents' legal team. "Dear Ms. Sophie Patterson, we are officially filing a lawsuit against you for defamation, invasion of privacy, theft of personal data, and severe damage to the reputation of the Patterson family. Damages sought $2 million. I threw my phone onto the bed, tears of helplessness streaming down my face. Rachel sat beside me, her voice disturbingly calm. "We kicked the hornet's nest. Now they're hitting back with everything they've got to protect what's left of the network. But it's my own parents filing a lawsuit against their daughter." Rachel. I almost screamed. "They want to bury me alive." Rachel gripped my shoulders, her tone sharp as a blade. "No, this isn't about family anymore. Sophie. This is a dirty war of media and legal manipulation aimed at destroying your credibility. You have to understand if they succeed in painting you as mentally unstable, your testimony becomes worthless in court. The next 3 days, social media exploded. Troll accounts swarmed Twitter, Reddit, Facebook. Crazy attention seeker playing victim. She made up everything to extort money from her wealthy family. Major depression in college, now full-blown paranoia. A few former friends from Chicago messaged me cautiously, "Is it true? Sophie." The news looks pretty bad. My job completely frozen. Colleagues stopped replying. The executive board ignored every message I sent. My reputation, my career, my relationships. Everything was plummeting into an endless void. I used to think I was strong, but now I was beginning to crack. That night, in my small rental room, I collapsed onto the floor, trembling uncontrollably. Maybe I was wrong. Rachel, I choked. Maybe I shouldn't have started this. Maybe I should have just lived with it like I always did. Rachel knelt in front of me, her eyes fierce, her voice slicing through me like a whip. "No, Sophie. That's exactly what they want for you to drown in fear. They only hold power when you stay silent. But because we have Kara, because we have real victims as raw data, and living witnesses, that's why they're panicking." She paused, gripping both my hands. "Do you know how most white-collar crime cases collapse, witnesses give up? The victims start doubting themselves. That's the classic strategy." "But this time is different," Rachel said firmly. "This time, we have too many pieces forming a chain. If we hold the line, they will fall." I sobbed uncontrollably, tears soaking my face, but somewhere within that panic, a tiny flame flickered. I nodded weakly, my voice hoarse. "Keep going, Jertaib. We'll keep going." The next morning, Rachel contacted a national media outlet. A major news network agreed to produce an exclusive investigative special based on everything we had gathered. But the price would be steep. "Once this airs, Sophie, there's no turning back. Their system will come after you relentlessly. But if we succeed, for the first time in Indiana's history, the entire network will be dragged into the light," Rachel said, locking eyes with me. I clenched my trembling fist, rage swelling like a rising tide. They've buried the truth for 2 decades. It's time to expose them. 3 weeks later, the final storm hit, and this time, I didn't flinch. Rachel, her investigative team, and I sat in the NBC News National Studio. Cold white spotlights circled above, and in front of me were dozens of cameras, their red lights glowing, ready to capture every word, every glance, every breath. The anchor began tonight. We bring you an explosive investigation into an illegal adoption network operating across multiple states for over 2 decades, originating from the small town of Hamilton, Indiana. The video footage rolled. The entire truth was laid bare before millions of viewers. The hard drive files, lists of families who illegally purchased children, forged adoption contracts, financial evidence of money laundering through offshore accounts, the video of my mother holding the newborn, confirming the transaction, the harrowing testimony of Kara Benson, the first victim to step forward publicly, each frame slammed like a brutal hammer against the carefully polished facade they had maintained for years. Within 24 hours of that broadcast, everything shifted. The FBI held an emergency press conference in Chicago. The spokesperson announced the launch of a multi-state federal task force, collaborating with Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Texas. Nearly 40 doctors, lawyers, adoption consultants, medical personnel, and brokers were now under special investigation. That same night, search warrants were executed across multiple sites. International banks began freezing offshore accounts tied to the network. On television, my father's name, George Patterson, appeared prominently as one of the key ringleaders. The next morning, I stood outside my temporary apartment as the familiar black FBI SUV pulled up. A federal agent stepped out, his voice firm. "We've taken your father into custody at his residence. Your mother surrendered herself 30 minutes ago." I stood frozen. No tears, no screams, no fear. Only a strange wave of relief surged through me, the relief of someone who had survived the storm. The preliminary hearing took place at the Indiana Federal Courthouse. Inside the courtroom, as my father was led in, I faced him for the first time from a position I never imagined. His eyes, once the same eyes that had taught me how to ride a bike, read me bedtime stories, now stared back hollow, defeated behind thick glass. My mother followed, pale, her hands shaking. But unlike my father, her eyes never left mine. A gaze pleading for forgiveness, begging for mercy, desperately searching for some last shred of humanity in the abyss she had thrown herself into. The judge read the charges. Defendant George Patterson, charged with federal fraud, interstate human trafficking, money laundering, forgery of medical and financial records, and organized criminal conspiracy, recommended starting sentence 45 years in federal prison. My father lowered his head, completely motionless. Mary Patterson, accomplice to obstruction, evidence tampering, and concealment. Due to her voluntary surrender and cooperation with federal investigators, the court recommends a suspended sentence with 3 years of federal supervision. My mother collapsed in tears as the sentence was read. My family's life shattered that day. But for the countless children sold over the years, justice had finally begun. Months later, I stood on stage at a national conference on child adoption reform. I was no longer the daughter of criminal George Patterson. I was a survivor, a voice for dozens of victims silenced for 2 decades. The one who exposed the grotesque darkness that masqueraded as family my entire life. Camera flashes erupted as I closed my speech. Justice is never easy, but silence is complicity. When ordinary people find the courage to speak, the darkness cannot hide forever. The entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation. Down below, Kara stood next to Rachel, tears glistening in her eyes but her face radiant with hope. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Free from the haunting illusion of a perfect family. Free from years of suffocating lies. And above all, free from the past they had tried to bury at any cost.